It's time for the Buck Brief. Wilfred Riley back in the mix. He is the author of Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me. He's a college professor, and he's a very smart dude. Wilfred, great to have you back on the program. Let's jump into the Al Smith dinner. Why wasn't Kamala there?
Well, she didn't want to be. I mean, I think one of the things we've seen with Kamala, with VP Harris, is that she's very nervous about how she's going to perform in these live, real kind of big game settings. I mean, I think we're going to talk about her Bret Baier interview as well. I mean, there's no way she wanted to be on a stage in front of a crowd of New York millionaires, running the risk of, acting like she often acts, breaking out into a fit of cackling or something like that. So she just decided to avoid that. I'm pretty sure her team played a big role there. That doesn't take much effort to imagine that.
I do like to be fair. And when I criticize Kamala for not doing things in public, then I always have to remind myself that the only thing worse than Kamala Harris not appearing in public is when she appears in public and then the news cycle is dominated by, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is the Democrat nominee.
Yeah, I mean, the boroughs are in a tough position right now, right? Because, I mean, their whole thing was that, for a very long time, they insisted that Joe Biden was totally functional. And that's just obviously not the case. I mean, Joe Biden appears to be dealing with early onset dementia or something like that. But I mean, almost up to the point of their nominating convention, they were running this dead guy. And when he had to leave the stage, I mean, it would have been impossible for them under modern conditions to get rid of his proud black female vice president. So they were stuck with Kamala. And at first, the media, you really see the boost they give to kind of the center left of the Democratic Party. I mean, they were running articles like the Kamala nomenon, who could resist it? This sort of crap. But I mean, realistically, Harris is a candidate that when she was running for president got 2% of the vote in a Democratic primary back in, I guess, 2020. She didn't survive on the ballot until her state. If you remember that, she was from California, fairly popular there. She didn't make it to California. So that's who the Democrats are running. And I mean, I think that there's an element of desperation now as they realize that.
Yeah, I thought all along that this was something that was so obviously not a good move that they wouldn't make this move, even with Joe Biden's being too old, whatever, with the dementia, however one wants to describe that. And I wonder, do you think that there's let's just assume Kamala loses, which I know that there's a chance somehow she could pull this off. I'm aware, but it feels like that would be a pretty crazy world. Let's assume, just for our topic of conversation, she loses. Do you think that there will be a prevailing narrative among Democrats that they shouldn't have bailed on Joe Biden, or do you think that they're just going to say, look, we had no choice?
I think, first of all, what they're going to do is blame any Kamala loss on racism and sexism. Just right off the bat. I mean, you're going to see a surge of articles like, I'm sorry, black women, we let you down. Guess America just wasn't ready for a black female president. A strong, proud black woman still can't make it in this country. So, I mean, that's going to be the immediate default. Like, I'm not a big nerd community member, but I'll sometimes check out the latest Star Wars or Trek or whatever movie. And I mean, the last couple have been unwatchable, and the general response is, so people aren't ready for strong female characters directed by a female director and producer. Yeah. It's the idea that the plot is just garbage is pretty much lost. So I think that'll be the response. There's no feasible way they could have run Joe Biden. I mean, once the media turned on Joe Biden.
Can we get? I like. By the way, I'm an adult, a functioning adult in a happy marriage, who pays his bills, and I still like video games, and I don't play them a lot, but I do play sometimes, and I do like sci-fi and fantasy genre, and I can just say that whether it's a game or a show, I actually think I can tell. I've never, I haven't had this been officially studied. 90% of the time, I can tell if it's a female writer doing the action genre, because I'm watching it and I'm just like, a guy didn't write this. I'm telling you, I know I can. And there's a huge push, as you know, in Hollywood to have not only minority representation in the writers' room be much higher than ever before, but particularly female minority writers and I just sit there, I'm like, this is like a DEI written show. I mean, I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's just pretty implausible. Like, I don't think you can tell that a woman wrote it. Well, maybe you can. I mean, the sex scenes and romance scenes are a bit different, and women have a slightly different sense of humor.
See,
But
women do have
I
a
think
different
that,
sensibility.
yeah, but I think that it's most visible when you see things that no one who's been in a fight could write.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that more guys have. More guys have played tackle football. The majority of men have. More guys have been in a brawl. So, I mean, the apex example would be something like the Black Widow movie, where you see one light female character chopping through 35 Russian soldiers or whatever, or people who've taken the Captain America super soldier serum. And you just realize, well, that's not something that's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, you do see that. I actually don't know whether the director for that movie was male or female, but I mean, I would assume that that's a movie where you're going to load up, as much diversity as you can on the production team.
Well, I just mean it particularly if you're looking at like showrunners, a little different in movies, right? 'Cause you have the director, but then you have all the writers for the script. But the showrunner is like the god of the TV show, right? The showrunner gets to make all the final decisions, creative and everything else. That's why I guess it's a pretty good name for it, right? The showrunner. And I tend to be able to, I'm just telling you my own experience. I'm watching something, I'm like, this is not, they didn't bring us their best with this one. This has been this has been one that's particularly boring, and they want a lot of people, I think, to. Another example of this would be like, I love the Ghostbusters franchise, and I actually was fine with the idea of a all-female Ghostbusters reboot if it was funny. It was horrible, but what they did is they turned around and they said, "Oh no, you're just sexist. That's why you don't like it." Even Dan Aykroyd got in on that, which is sad, but he's unfortunately a talented communist.
A talented communist. That's a good description of a lot of the people in Hollywood. But I mean, I think just bluntly, looking at this, a lot of woke stuff sucks for the same reason that a lot of Christian rock is terrible. It's too upfront with the message. So, like, there's conservative content. Like, I'm actually in the recent Matt Walsh movie, Am I Racist, which is hilarious. It's one of the funniest movies I've seen without plugging, myself or a casual buddy. I mean, there's a scene where SJWs are convinced that they're about to whip either themselves or this old man in a wheelchair who's presented as a racist. I mean, there's funny conservative content, but you have to be subtle about just saying, and you should love Jesus every couple of minutes. And it's the same problem with woke stuff. Like, obviously, there's nothing wrong with the female Ghostbusters reboot. Like, some guys would be annoyed just because it's a classic male almost combat team, but women could have done that movie. The problem is just if you load it up every couple of minutes with comments like, and the strong women needed to handle this, the average guy watching this with a date is just going to get disgusted and consider walking out of the theater.
Well, and
so it's the Christian rock problem.
I made the comment on Twitter a while ago. I got into how I see so many of these movies where, in a superhero context, we're all believing in this sort of, you can have like gamma rays and you're super strong or whatever, right? So, okay, fine. So I'm not saying like you can't have Wonder Woman, but I'm talking about in the context of the world that you're operating in, where it's normal human strength, and you have women who are just like throwing 250-pound, Russian GRU guys like over their shoulder, like it's not like a sack of potatoes, 15 guys. This is just absurd. And people say, oh, well, guys can't fight as well as they show in the movies. I'm like, yeah, but if you put a toddler on the screen, okay, if you put a 4-year-old and the 4-year-old was doing fly kicks and knocking everybody out, it's too much suspension of disbelief. I got into big fights with people about this at the time because I don't know. A 120-pound bikini model tends not to do as well in an all-out brawl as a burly dude. That just seems to be my experience as a human being.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. It actually is an interesting question, and it's kind of some theoretical perspective. So I get it, sort of. Like, this came up with Dungeons and Dragons recently, where, people were asking, why aren't there crippled people in Dungeons and Dragons? You have the ghosts of dragons fighting skeleton warriors. I mean, why you have a species called orcs that are, carnivorous semi-humans. Like, why couldn't you have a dude in a wheelchair who, can make his limbs move by magic? But I actually think there's a difference between the two concepts. Like, you're projecting an alternative world, sure, where some people have superpowers, but you'd assume that within the context of the alternative world, if I really had to think about this, the other rules would be pretty much the same. So, like, if you're a wizard and you're in a wheelchair, why wouldn't you just heal yourself? If you can't do that and you're sitting in a chair, you probably wouldn't be any better as a fighter relatively than someone in a wheelchair here on this planet. It's the same thing with women. Like if you're talking about Captain America or Black Widow, where you take these potions or whatever and you gain strength, you would be stronger than an average person if you were a woman, but you probably wouldn't be stronger than all of the men that had done the same thing.
Oh, that's
so.
true.
I mean, I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of the issue, right? Like you're fighting other superheroes. Like I don't know. I guess you could have different levels of power. So like Wonder Woman is stronger than Aquaman. I'm mildly embarrassed that I know all this, but in general, yeah, it would be implausible for most people.
I'm impressed.
Yeah,
Professor Riley going deep on this one. What's the best sci-fi series or movie in your mind you've ever seen? What would you put there?
The best sci-fi series or movie? I don't really. I mean, movie, maybe the original Star Wars trilogy. I mean, that is a classic, classic set of movies. I mean, the best, honestly. So, an actual recommendation: the best sci-fi and fantasy content I've ever consumed. There's only books and TV shows. Was S.M. Sterling. It's called the Emberverse. It's about what would happen to Earth if certain forms of technology, like combustion engines and weapons, just stopped working. And like the first couple of books are just everybody dying. So, I mean, that's like planes wouldn't fly, boats wouldn't fly. People were abandoned in submarines at the bottom of the ocean and ended up eating each other. Like the first couple of books are actually pretty gory. But the theme of the book is that people respond to this, sort of getting their power taken away by God as a nuclear war approach. And so, I mean, there's a character, Norman Arminger, that teaches people to fight as knights. It ends up taking over most of what we call Oregon. And it's actually surprisingly realistic. I mean, like if someone on the back, yeah, like a cowboy on the back of a horse with a broadsword would be unstoppable if you didn't have your gun. I mean, there actually is a city that figures out how to respond to that. It's called Corvallis, which trains people with pikes. So you've got like these party girls and farm kids. Party girls would be more crossbow women. They couldn't hold a pike. But like you've got all these people that are going out to fight the night guy carrying their glaives over their shoulders and so on. And this goes on for a while. There's the last comment, there's a Prince character called Rudy, who's the son of one of the knight types and one of this person that believes they're a witch, and he ends up conquering a lot of the continent. It's a fascinating series of books. So it's S.M. Sterling's The Emberverse.
Oh, very cool. We were just talking about defense a second ago. Bear Creek Arsenal, my friends, firearm brand that's something you need to know. It makes the best. Bear Creek Arsenal makes the best firearms at the best prices you're going to see anywhere in the market. I've got multiple rifles from Bear Creek. I've got pistols. The Grizzly, Bear Creek. The Grizzly is their 9mm handgun. It's a fantastic piece of firearms craftsmanship. I've been very accurate with that out at the range. I'm actually going to be at the range this weekend shooting it. So easy to go on their site and find the gun you want. Just in case you change your mind, they've got a 30-day no questions asked return policy in addition to their incredible lifetime warranty. So if you're looking for a rifle or pistol for self-defense, target shooting, or hunting, I recommend you go to bearcreekarsenal.com. Limited time sales going on right now. Use my name, Buck, for 10% off your first order. bearcreekarsenal.com. That's bearcreekarsenal.com. Exclusions apply. So how do you think the Bret Baier interview went? We mentioned that one. What do you think of that one?
I mean, I think it was a complete disaster. Again, it's hard to overstate as a political scientist the edge that the media and academia gives to not like the Bernie Sanders true left, but to kind of the center left of the Democratic Party, because everyone agrees with them in those realms. So like when you ask why conservatives distrust social science, I think a short answer is, how would liberals react to social science or the intellectual media if 94% of people in that world were on the right and 6% were on the left, and the academy kept releasing, published papers talking about how much happier women are as housewives, for example, which seems to be true. And the answer is, of course, I mean, there'd be complete rejection by half of society, which is what you're kind of seeing in the other direction now. But I mean, so I've already seen some of the spin, and again, Bret Baier must be a racist. He must be a sexist who would ask those ambushing questions. But the reality is that that's mostly just cope. Like, it was a very bad interview. Trump's had bad interviews himself, although not at this level. I mean, Baier opened with the obvious question, which is, what are you going to do about immigration? Let's start with how many illegals came across the border during your administration. And the best way to handle that would probably be like George Bush talking about his DUIs, where he said, yeah, like, I made some mistakes. It's really embarrassing. That's a felony crime. I haven't had a drink in 20 years. Let's talk about me running for office. Harris didn't do that. She didn't say, okay, it's estimated at 12 million, but that's overestimated, which is an argument. It's about 8 or 9. We're going to close the border. Here's my plan. Instead, she said, well, ha, 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 that's a tough one. Let me get around to that, or something to that effect. And then started doing her stump speech, almost literally, like, well, this was before the Inflation Reduction Act, and this was before our bipartisan bill dealing with commerce and so on. And Baier obviously visibly became annoyed and pursued it. And Harris, I don't think, ever answered that. And then you get into Lake and Riley and the people that were murdered by illegals, and there's not really a response there either. There is one, actually, that I'd be given if I was playing poker with a hand that week, which is, well, illegal immigrants have a lower crime rate than native-born Black or white Americans, which is often true. So I regret those cases. But even the response even there is, well, all immigrant crime, though, is what we'd call additional. You could have zero crimes by illegal immigrants just by not letting in illegal immigrants. So, okay, if you say black guys are quote unquote rednecks have a high crime rate, that's true. But those are Americans. We're not sending them anywhere. If you guys have almost the same crime rate, you shouldn't be here. We can just put you on a bus and ship you back across the border. So it's really hard to defend Harris's migration policy, and she did not defend it well, to say the least.
Well, also, I think the evasion on the number just shows you that it would be so devastating. Just the video of Kamala Harris saying, I think 8 million, I think the number that Border Patrol has given us or that ICE has given us is 8 million during the last 4 years, comma, but blah, blah, blah. Even her just admitting that it's 8 million, I think is because the number is so big, right? I mean, it's so big compared to previous administrations. It's obvious that this was really like a rest of the world free for all to get into the country. And then beyond that, Bret didn't have time to get to this because Kamala was kind of both filibustering and attacking at the same time, like trying to say, oh, you're being rude, but I'm going to talk about nonsense, but you're being rude, but here. They've let thousands of convicted murderers into the country. That's how bad the vetting is. I mean, this came out from DHS as well. Thousands of murderers in the U.S. now.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing that, again, I'm not at all defending letting in any illegal immigrants at all. I'd build a wall in front of the border and put a moat filled with alligators in front of it just as a joke. I have a Bukele-like approach to crime, which is that it stops when you kill or lock up criminals. We've known this since the Old Testament. I don't know why we're playing around here. I find this a really irritating topic. But there were 13,000 murderers let into the country. There's a lower rate of murder than most American communities, again, African American, Scots Irish, native born Hispanic, so on, have. The question there, though, is why did we let in any murderers? So with immigration, you have this back and forth when people say immigrants are nice, hardworking people. Okay. Yeah, they don't commit any more crimes than we do. Okay, maybe. Again, I'd be interested in whether police departments look at immigration status, because that could topple this whole edifice right off the bat. We don't really know which do and which don't. That's some social science right there. But finally, though, like if you find out that someone's a murderer, you can literally just put the cuffs on him and detain him at the border. I don't see how that could have happened. It was, by the way, it's also 29,000 rapists, I think. So yeah. The illegal population seemed to have a lower rate of murder, but a higher rate of rape than the American population. And again, if you know that someone's a rapist, that's not a crime someone commits once, you can just not let them in. That's again, you're right. It's a tough thing for her to answer.
And that's why I think she just ran around in circles, didn't answer it. Our sponsor here is IFCJ. You may have seen Israel just killed the head of Hamas. Now, that's a good thing. Yahya Sinwar is a very, very bad guy. He's an evil guy who killed a lot of people, men, women, and children, and hurt a lot of Palestinians as well in this process. He's effectively imprisoned the Palestinian people in this terrorist mayhem. But the war in Israel rages on, and they need support of allies at home and abroad. And that's where the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews comes in. They provide food, shelter, and safety to those in need during this crisis. Right now, there are thousands of reservists who have been called up, but their families are left behind, and many of them are struggling. There's something that you can do, though. A gift of $150 would allow the fellowship to provide food and other necessities to the families of these reservists who have been called up to defend their country. And thanks to a generous fellowship supporter, your gift will be matched, doubling in impact. Join us in letting those families know that listeners like you stand with Israel. Call to make your $150 gift right now at 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-4325, or go online to supportifcj.org. That's supportifcj.org. Wilfred Riley, man, always fun to have you on. Audience is like, where's Wilfred? I'm like, I'll ask. He's a busy man. He's got a lot of things going on. Lies, my liberal teacher, told me is a great book, which I recommend to everybody. Any closing thoughts on the election? Next time we talk, we're going to have results in. Any closing thought on the election before the ballots are counted?
Right now, right now I feel like if everything goes the way it should, Trump's probably got it in the bag. I mean, we just saw the Al Smith dinner. I mean, we're seeing, he's campaigning across all of media. He had to pull out because of illness or something. He was going to be on the Shade Room today, talking to Joe Rogan, this kind of thing. So it seems logically like Trump's going to be able to get a lot of those low participation voters out there, black males, young college men of all backgrounds. The one issue I have with this, I'm not going to say I predict a lot of cheating in the actual technical legal sense, but there are a lot of these election rules that have been changed in ways that benefit the party in large urban areas, and that's the Democrats. So, I really encourage people who are on the right, and for that matter, the 5 libertarians in the game who vote for Trump at the top of the ticket. But I encourage people to get out there and vote, because you're countering something like half of my friends, like feminist women I dated in college have already all voted. Like half of my friends in Chicago and in Louisville have voted by now. So that's the thing that I kind of worry about. Like Trump gaining momentum in the end, is that going to matter? That's a question, because, 20% of the ballots have already been sent in. So that's something that could, ballot harvesting is going on. They got to vote out of Jimmy Carter, who can't talk anymore. That is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. That's something that really shouldn't be legal in most cases. You should have to show up with your ID and a paper ballot to vote. They manage that in Nicaragua, other countries I've passed through. But yeah, I think right now, I think Trump's got it.
Yeah, if he doesn't, in my mind, it's because of what you just talked about, which is just the Democrat machine is so formidable that they can run the worst candidate I've ever seen in my life, and that's what Kamala is. So we'll see. Wilfred Riley, great to see you, man. Thanks again.
Thanks, Buck. Have a good one.